The senator for Utah.
I ask unanimous consent to suspend the quorum call.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Mr. President, the men and women who responded to the horrific events of September 11th, 2001 are among the great heroes in American history. Whether fighting the deadly flames, rescuing people who were injured or dying, or removing the destructive debris from the 9/11 attack sites, the 9/11 volunteers and rescue workers displayed the courage and the sacrificial service that has earned them universal respect and admiration. Tragically, their heroism came at a cost. Their heroism at exactly these same dangerous sites that we're describing earned them, in addition to great respect, also health challenges in the years since. In 2001, in response to those challenges, Congress established the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund to compensate both the survivors of the attacks and also the residents who lived near the site. It was authorized for 2 years, and it paid out about $7 billion in benefits, and then closed. In 2011, Congress revived and expanded the program to cover a larger universe of victims and responders. And it authorized that fund to spend $2.7 billion over 5 years. In 2015, citing a growing need, Congress reauthorized the fund for another 5 years and an additional $4.6 billion. Of that $7.4 billion authorized since 2011, the fund has now paid out $5.2 billion. With money getting tight, in February of this year, the fund began temporarily reducing the claimant's benefits until Congress reauthorized and replenished it, and until such time as we could make those beneficiaries whole. I support that effort. I support it wholeheartedly. The bill before us today authorizes the program not for 2 years, as we did in 2001, or for 5 years, as we did in 2011 and 2015. No, it authorizes the program for an additional 72 years, and it does not specify a dollar amount. In Washington, Mr. President, this is a recipe for trouble. As we all know, finite authorizations are how Congress ensures that taxpayer money actually gets to its intended beneficiaries and not simply lost in government bureaucracy somewhere. It's how we make sure that this is about protecting those who are supposed to benefit rather than government bureaucrats themselves. Since 2011, the 9/11 Victims Fund has always had finite authorizations, and by all accounts, it has had an excellent record of avoiding waste and abuse. These two things are not coincidental. They go together. 9/11 survivors and first responders deserve no less moving forward. They deserve no less than to make sure that the program created in their honor for their benefit, in fact, benefits them. This is why I'd like to offer a simple amendment to this bill that would authorize $10.2 billion in additional funding for the 9/11 Victims Fund over the next 10 years. That is the amount that the Congressional Budget Office has estimated is necessary for covering all valid claims between now and 2029. My amendment would further authorize an additional $10 billion beyond that time. My amendment would not block or delay the bill's consideration, let alone its passage. Mr. President, this is something that we could vote on in a matter of minutes, 15 minutes or so, and then move on to final passage. We could, in fact, accomplish all of this today before we adjourn for the weekend. This is, in fact, what I would prefer. I think finishing our work on this bill to protect victims and first responders is worth 15, 20, 30 minutes of our time, and that is what I would prefer. I have had conversations with my colleagues, including colleagues across the aisle, and in order to accommodate requests from some of my colleagues, I have agreed, with their mutual assent, to negotiate a different arrangement, one that would make sure that we get to final passage on this bill, and that we consider my amendment and that of Senator Paul within the next few days. And so, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that at a time to be determined by the Majority Leader in consultation with the Democratic Leader, the Senate proceed, or that is to say that this occur on or before Wednesday, July 24th, that the Senate proceed to the consideration of calendar number 153, H.R. 1327, and that the only amendments in order be a Lee Amendment number 928 and the Paul Amendment number 929 to be offered, and that there be up to 2 hours of concurrent debate equally divided between the leaders or designees, and that the Senate then vote in relation to the amendments in the order listed, with no second-degree amendments in order prior to the votes, and that there be 2 minutes equally divided prior to each vote, and that each amendment be subject to an affirmative 60-vote threshold. I further ask that upon disposition of the amendments, the bill be read a third time, and that the Senate vote on H.R. 1327 as amended, if amended, all with no intervening action or debate, notwithstanding Rule 22. Mr. President, I am grateful to the Democratic leader and to both senators from New York for working with me on this and for getting this, along with my amendment and Senator Paul's, set up for a vote. To be very clear, I want there to be no ambiguity. I'd be willing to vote on this right now. There's no reason why we should have to delay that. I'm taking into account scheduling requests made by other members of this body, requests that were made by them. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware, as far as Senator Paul is concerned, we'd be happy to vote on these immediately. There is no additional reason for delay. This is how the Senate is supposed to work. Each member is supposed to have the opportunity to bring forward amendments, to offer up improvements to legislation, to make sure that they happen right. I respectfully but strongly disagree with my colleagues on the merits of some of the issues that we've been discussing. We'll debate those more in the coming days. I'd reiterate here that it is not unreasonable to suggest that a program that takes the unprecedented step of authorizing and funding something until 2092, that coupled with language authorizing the expenditure of such sums as may be necessary, creates problems. And it's one of the reasons why we ought to vote on this amendment, one of the reasons why I believe in this amendment. In any event, this is the kind of thing that ought not be difficult when any member of any political background sees a potential weakness or defect in a piece of legislation. The rules of our body are such that we're supposed to be able to offer that up and cast an amendment. In this circumstance, I'm pleased that it worked out the way that it did, and we'll be able to get votes on those amendments. Thank you, Mr. President.